Yo, full transparency. The only reason I'm doing this video is because yet again, there are people calling for a buff for Hulk on Marvel's Avengers. I disagree with that, just like I disagreed with the nerfs to the Adaptoids. Crying shame what y'all did to those guys. They're not even a challenge anymore. But there are people calling for a buff for this character. I don't think that they know what they're doing. I've done previous videos on Hulk and how I personally use him as a tank, which I think he's most efficient if you utilize him in a role that his skills and his abilities are more so complemented. And that is by way of using him as a tank. So high defense. And I have videos on how I did the heroic gauntlet, for example, the one where you can only use one character, you got the 8 stages, and you can only you can use more than one character. And I encourage you to, because if your character dies, he's out. But I only have Hulk available, and I did that whole entire deal on Challenge 4 on Brutal with Hulk. Go watch my previous video about that, and I show you how I did that. Also showing you how to use Hulk in that role. I have an additional video in that regards. But I saw some of the comments and saying that, well, look how long it's taking you to defeat some enemies. I don't want to be doing that. I don't want to play him as a tank, which again, I think is stupid. But you can play him dealing more damage, certainly from a melee perspective, if that's something that you want to do, and you can still be effective. Lejeune is another content creator who has an awesome Hulk. He has a couple of exotics as well, and you can watch his content, and his Hulk is different from mine, so it can be done. I do think there's a certain style that you have to play if you're going to play on those higher difficulties, and that's what we're going to be talking about, and what kind of gear things that you should take into consideration if you're going to play Hulk like that. I'm going to go through all of that. So I'm giving you suggestions. It's not static. This is why I'm going to talk about things that you can swap in and swap out for gear that you particularly have and gear you need to look for if you're going to play Hulk like this. I will go ahead and show you guys this just really quick for those of you that just want to see what he's dealing. Almost 300 might, as you can see. And that's his highest thing. I would say don't go too low on his defense, even if you do want to use him dealing more damage. I would not personally recommend that. I wouldn't go any lower than probably 1500, if you will, with the defense. But you can get away with lower defense, and he has that rage, and that's stuff that we're going to talk about that you need to be taking into consideration and taking advantage of, because of course he can get health by attacking enemies when using rage. Okay, now that's out the way. Let's go through the gear that I have on this particular Hulk and why. I gotta reiterate, I would not recommend to be the best Hulk. I would not recommend playing him like this. Play him as a tank. Nonetheless, here we have this gear equipped, and as you can see, we have buffs to both our light combo finishers, which they have misspelled on the plasma sector. One gives plasma damage, one gives the damage buff. So what I'd recommend is trying to get that damage buff and doing that a lot in terms of the heavy combo finisher, so you can get that damage buff, and then those enemies you're gonna be able to chip away at those enemies even more. So taking that into consideration, what I just said as far as the rage modifier, this one 23.8% chance and increased status damage from rage attacks when you're using those, when you have R2 held, if you're playing on PS2, all right, trigger on Xbox, I believe, and you're doing that, just make sure that you are if you can get something that gives you increased status damage, increased damage or something like that with your rage, try to do that, because you're going to be using rage a lot, considering that you're going to be in the mix and dealing that damage, and you're not going to be a tank. So here's a very important one, and not necessarily the range, but if you can do those spin rocks, it's not very important. Let me kind of dial it back. It's important if you want to use the spin rock, which I use when you pick up the meteor and you do the spin attack. It technically counts as ranged, and you have the plasma damage that you can do from it, which I have equipped there. I would also say that if you can get one of these, going back to the melee gear, my gear, I think the best gear that you can get for him is something that the power attacks deal particle damage. Oh my God. When you're doing that ground pounder, you're constantly dealing all of that damage for the Pim Infuser and shrinking those enemies. That thing is so clutch. Nonetheless, here we have another one that's probably the most important one out of all of these is the Nimble Graviton Explosion, 18.5% chance. Perfect evading triggers anti-gravity field that causes nearby enemies to float in the air. So important. You're going to be in the mix, and I think perfect dodging is one of those things that you can do a lot, and you're going to be doing a lot of if you're going to be fighting bigger enemies, stronger enemies, and you're up in them and you're always wanting to fight. Dealing out that melee damage. If you can get something that is going to have that perfect evading, like this one, where if the enemies are going to float, I would say get it. Even if it gives you a buff or something, get something in which when you perfect evade, you get some sort of perk out of it. This is not the one that I usually use. Usually I use one in which I take damage and it causes the explosion. But we're not doing that right now because we're not focusing on that as far as a tank. We're not using him as a tank. We also get proximity armor as well when we're near teammates. So for you guys that hate to get staggered, which I don't have a problem in that. That's a key one. This is a good one as well. You have the heavy combo finishers are dealing 17.5% stun damage. So going back to this one where the heavy combo finishers grant a damage buff, you see we got a lot happening with that heavy combo. So we're going to be doing a lot of that with this particular build. We're also getting 13.3% chance in defeating enemies, getting damage buff. If you want to chip away at those enemies, you dopamine guys that just need that satisfaction and beat the enemy as short, to get to the successes in as short period of time as possible. I got you. Damage buff right there. 2 damage buffs we have if you consider the melee gear as well. And also this invulnerability, you're defeating 5 enemies in rapid succession, and you get that invulnerability. Now, of course, I'm going to play. I don't like to not show you guys this build in action. Things to take into consideration as I'm playing is that you need to be paying attention to that status damage. So once you get a damage buff, get aggressive. Once you get an invulnerability buff, go to an enemy that is, if you can, if they're in the vicinity, and deal as much damage as you possibly can. Pay attention to the buffs and the status damage and all of that when you are playing as Hulk. Skills wise, there's nothing more so important, but I know some of you guys are going to want to take a look at it. Here, I use the support assault and ultimate heroics as my get out of jail free card. I do not necessarily use them. My heroic rating is not high enough to use them to focus on how much damage I'm going to always do. I more so use it in a way that will allow me to, if I get some damage done to me and I get in that critical area where I may end up dying, what I end up doing is popping off one of these, depending on where I'm at. Of course, you can pay attention to all that. I also have this one, which, I can get more than one. Because I do have one that grants me the mastery, that grants me the takedowns, getting a heroic orb, that's important to me. So I would recommend you getting this as Hulk and always trying to do a takedown. I don't care if the enemy's almost dead. Do the takedown, get the heroic orb, get your heroic abilities back loaded, and always use those in that regards as just your get out of jail free card. All of this stuff isn't necessarily important. You can play around with some of that. Of course, I would say with this one, get the rage defense. When you're in rage, you're getting defensive strength because your defense is not that high. So, of course, you guys can see how all of this, if you want to just real quick see what I'm working with on the intrinsic overcharge, there you go. All right, so we're going to play. We're on Brutal, of course, doing a hive. Let's jump right into it here on the second floor. So, like I said, doing those buffs as much as I can. There are some, and I've equipped those and I've shown you those, where you can use, I think the thing that slept on the most about Hulk is the fact that he can obviously grab all of these enemies, dealing hella damage. And when you're doing that, if you can get some gear to complement, there's some really unique gear out there for that, where you're talking 100% status damage for that. As you see, we have the invulnerability buff because we just defeated 5 enemies in a row. Look, man, he's dealing hella damage right now with that damage buff, and we have it popping off. And no matter what I do with the heavy combos and all of that stuff, That's how you play them. Get gear. Gear is so important on this game, and I think because it's attracted a lot of people that aren't necessarily familiar with this type of game, they look at this and they're like, oh wow, I'm not getting the success that I want, therefore something must be wrong with the game. And it's not. There's nothing wrong with the game. We just flew through that. We have to do another floor. Holy crap. But yeah, you can of course play Hulk as DPS, dealing as much damage as possible. I just prefer, and that's why I've done those videos, that you use him as a tank, because definitely in team play, it's a very useful tool for those of you that are preparing for like aim labs and raids. If you have if you're working on your Hulk tank build, it's gonna benefit you guys so much. I do it. You see me play when we stream, and you're always seeing me say, hey, all right, I'm doing a bone shaker. Enemies are gonna be facing me. I can handle all those enemies without any sort of sweat. I'm dealing as much status damage as I possibly can. Like, all of that stuff is important. So play him as a tank. I highly recommend. But if you want to play him in this way, you can. And I've been giving you, ways to do it if you want to deal as much damage as possible, because some people were complaining in the previous video that, well, it's taking too long when I see you fight and to deal all of that damage to those enemies, because my melee on those other builds are going to be in the 1000s. Not that high, but that's fine for me. I don't have that issue where, oh, it's not fun if I'm not just destroying enemies left or right. Like that doesn't bother me at all. But elbow dropping into the oh man, it does so much damage. Elbow dropping into that ground pound is something that I think you guys should do a little more. I know a lot of you guys focus on doing this out of it and then doing it, which that does take a little bit, but you can do it off of the elbow drop and still go right into the ground pound, and it's a tad bit faster to do that. And plus, if you jump in the air, depending on what enemy it is, those ones that are just focusing on the ground, you don't have to worry about those once you jump in the air. So I don't know why we're going through this hive this fast, but it says 14 floors. And I'm not gonna do the entire thing for the sake of this video. I just wanted to kind of show you guys him in action. Hopefully we can go into the adaptors that you guys advocated be nerfed, and I can show you guys how that's in action. You're getting those damage buffs, man. It can do a lot of damage with 2,000 something melee. A lot of damage. I don't know why my allergies are off the chain right now. All right, going back into it. I will say this, like I said in my last video. Now he's floating up in the air. You see that? It was because of the perfect dodge. Dodge, Gohan. Focus on dodging.
Destroy the turbines.
Dodge.
AIM has sent forces to stop.
But what was I mentioning? Yes. So a lot of you guys talk about the jumping and the adjustments being made to Hulk. I don't think he should jump higher. Not until they have some sort of traversal focus, like reason, like for him to do that. Because right now he's already the fastest traveler. If he's in open space, he's faster than the flyers off of the jumping. What you can do is maybe give him pressurized jumping. Therefore, it will allow him to kind of, you can angle. Oh, we got two of these boys. They're not any problem. We're not even sweating at all on these adaptors, because they're not even a challenge anymore. Because again, people that call for the nerfs. So we have hella increased damage right now. Willpower recovery, all kinds of crap going down, and the adaptoids are now dead. Again, we're playing on brutal. I do not play on anything other than that when I am playing. So you can see we're dealing a lot of damage. This is an interesting build. I wouldn't recommend you play like that, but I can see how some of you guys would, of course, be having a lot of fun out of that. But going back to the thing, until there's like patrol missions where the map is so big and stuff like that, there's no reason to make him jump higher per se. That would be he would be the fastest traveler by a mile, even more, if that's how you approached it. The Robots are the highest guys to fight now. But yeah, like he doesn't need that necessarily. Ah, dang it, I couldn't grab him. He doesn't need that. He doesn't need that. Not yet. Like, you can always make the fly faster, you know, give Cap a motorcycle, that type of stuff when the time comes and you're doing like patrol missions and stuff, if that ever comes. But right now it's not necessary. Give him pressurized jumping so he can get in those tight spots. And I think that's good enough right now. He doesn't need all the other stuff. All right, let's do this. Try to see if we can get this damage buff. Well, hella status damage. The adaptoids aren't even a problem. You're seeing how much damage we're doing to these guys. There's no sweat. All right. Perfect dodge. Dodge, you go hunt. Always dodge. And that's the stuff that, look, the reality is no matter how, you look at all these build videos that people do, just being completely transparent, there's going to be certain things you just can't do because you don't possess the, I don't want to say the capacity, it sounds bad, but it's the honest to God truth that it's not gear related, reaction speed, all of that stuff that you just can't account for in a build. You can try to compensate for it, but you can't account too much for it. I got a defense and a damage buff right now. Alright, trying to get. But yeah, they're not even a problem anymore. Like, they're so easy now, at least in my honest opinion. And man, he's dealing, like, obviously it's taking me way longer to deal the damage on him, and it's not as difficult now. Let's go to this other Daptoid, and then we'll end the video there. Ah, check that guy out. So I'm just telling you how I play. Look, there's other ways that you can be effective, but don't go blaming the game immediately in the event that you're not effective. The gear is probably the most important thing on this game, but there are things that you can't. It's part gear, part skill. You know what I'm saying? And part reaction speed and stuff like that. So, well, in the video there, you're seeing that he can be effective in a multitude of different ways. This guy, his defense is almost like half of what he is when I generally use him. Go see my previous videos where his defense is basically at 3,000 when I use him as a tank. But you can get away with using him in other ways. You just have to be effective with your gear and play to your gear. Like, change your play based upon the gear that you collect. Don't just get new gear, swap it in, and continue to play the same. Play to your gear strength. I'm focusing a lot on heavy combo finishers because, again, we're getting the damage buff. If we do that, we're also getting the damage buff on the lethal buff, 13.3% chance to defeat enemies grant damage buff, but also the heavy combo finisher here is a 17.5% increased stun damage from it. So we're doing a lot of combos. We're able to get those takedowns, get those heroic orbs, and that's how you can be very, very effective. If you are that guy that needs that quick fix, you want to see success as quick as possible, and you want to feel super, as a lot of you guys say already, you don't feel super. Play to your gear strength, get gear, collect gear in which you can mix things up, focus on those buffs, and play to the buffs. Hopefully this video has helped some of you guys out a lot. Please stop calling for buffs and nerfs to enemies, buff to all the heroes. Sure, there can be tweaks here and there, but for balancing purposes as well as you know, look, man, some of you guys just got to pay attention to what it is that you're doing. So I hope you got some help from this. Until next time, y'all be easy. Peace.